Hi, I'm Wonda Bornstein, and I wanted to share a little bit of my story so that you understand how truth and identity came about. It really started with me always wanting to know truth and always having a question about the identity, the lineage of the African American people. And that was very early on in my age, and I just really wanted to know that. Truth was always something that was very important to me, and starting at the time I was 15 years old, I started to question the truth that I had learned and discovered. And it kind of, my journey starts with my family. My mother and my father were both strong followers of Jesus. They took us to church on Sundays. My father and mother both wanted us to have a Christian education, and so they sent their kids, all all six of us. I have five brothers. I left me out, including myself, and they would drive us every day to Arlington, Virginia. We lived in Upper Marlboro, Maryland, so that was a little bit of a drive. And they pick us up every day, and it was one of those journeys that, as I was writing and as a little girl starting kindergarten in 1968, that I didn't understand why the kids treated me differently. In my home with my parents, my mom had a daycare center in our home, and we had children of different colors, and so I kind of grew up in an environment thinking that that was the way the real world was. At least the attitudes that were displayed, because the kids, we played together and we didn't see each other any different other than kids playing with one another. So it was different when I went to school. And then I ended up going to a school in Maryland. My mom found a school much closer to us, and that was in 1971 or 1972, and my brothers ended up going to another high school, and they were all Christian schools that we went to. And that was kind of how my Christian journey began, but it also started with my father. I was 4 years old. I was sitting in his room as he was reading the Bible to us, and he started to talk about this man named Jesus and salvation. And I told him I wanted to be saved, and we prayed together. And then after, by the time I got into high school, I started to question what I was believing. And the things that I was questioning was it true? And I was reading the Watchtower. I loved reading that. We had the Quran in our home. My brother was studying that, and so I had the Quran there with me. And one day I was in my room, and I just started praying, and I just said, God, I just want to know truth. Help me to know what is true. And there I had the Watchtower, the Quran, the scriptures. And after I finished praying, it was just such a sincere prayer. And after I finished praying, I opened up, my hands immediately went to scripture. And it opened up to John 14:6, when Jesus was talking and said, I am the way, I am the truth, and I am the life. And that just really nailed it for me at that time. I knew I was following truth, and I've continued to since. But one of the things that I often thought about a lot was the identity, the lineage of the African American people. And I didn't understand why there were so many people that had their identity. They knew who they were. They knew the countries that their ancestors came from, and we didn't. And I kept wondering, like, why is that? Is our lost? Is it hidden? What's going on with that? But I never really did much research, and it was always in the back of my mind. My oldest brother, Donnell, who passed away years ago, he was my history teacher, and he was my ancient history teacher. He loved reading about ancient African history, and he would share with me about the Nubian kingdom, and he would share with me about the ancient Egyptians and these black kingdoms and how they established civilization. And so I knew that part of ancient history and was excited, but I wanted to know a lot more. And so years later would go by, and as I was on a journey going to a Bible study with some colleagues, I started to think about something we had just read when we left our Bible study, and that was Zephaniah. Zephaniah was talking about who he was and who his lineage, and one of the people that he named was Cush. And I thought, well, is he talking about Cush as in Ham's descendant Cush? And actually, when I looked up certain people's interpretation, a couple rabbis said no, he was talking about he was talking about that. He was talking about his lineage of Cush. And I just thought that was fascinating. And then at that time, I started to think about how God really looks at people. And he doesn't look at them based on color. He looks at them based on their lineage, their fathers that they came from. And that took me to Genesis, and I started to read again Genesis, and I'd read it many times, but I started to read again Noah's sons, Ham, Shem, and Japheth. And as I was reading that, I just said, well, Wanda, you've always been told you're a descendant of Ham, and that's something to be proud of, because when you look at how the Hamitic people basically started civilization right after the flood, and the very positive thing that's being said about one of Ham's children that God says is Nimrod, when he says he was a mighty hunter before the Lord. And then when you look into scripture further and you see the lineage that Jesus had in his own background of Hamitic descent, when you look at the Canaanite Rahab the prostitute, and you just see this lineage, and I just thought, wow, well, that's something to be proud about as well. And so I kind of claimed that. And then what happened was, in claiming that, I started to hear Caucasians, Europeans, say that black people in this country don't know who they are, that they are actually the descendants of Shem, and they are the actual bloodline descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And when I first heard that, I just thought, man, that's just crazy. I've never heard of such a thing. I knew that and believed, and from my reading many years prior, that the ancient Israelites were, the modern day Jews, European Jews. I knew that they were converted. They converted to Judaism, but I'd never looked at, where the ancient Israelites of the Bible, the people of the Bible, I never looked at where they were, what happened to them. And my husband, who I'd known since I was 14 years old, we got married late in life, and he was part Italian and part Jewish, and so he was going on this kind of journey discovery with me, because he wanted to know what was the ancient ancestry of the European Jews, and he wanted to understand that for himself, and then we both were interested in my lineage as well, and we were studying that and looking into that information, and I'm sharing with him things that I've learned. And it was really where that journey started. So I started to say, well, let me take a look at this. Why are people saying that? Why have I heard that many, many years prior? And I just kind of pushed it out of my mind. And as I started to look at that journey, and I focused in on some of the scriptures that I was led to read by the Europeans, by the Caucasians, and that was Deuteronomy 28. And I always wondered why black people were at the bottom, like why it was so hard for us, why did we struggle so much? And as I was reading Deuteronomy 28, what it revealed to me as I was enlightened by them was that God told the ancient Israelites that, if you obey me, I'm going to do all these things for you. There's all these promises that's going to happen. But if you disobey me and you follow the practices of the nations around you that I say are wicked, or the things that they do are wicked, I'm going to bring these curses on you. And so you will be under a curse. And so in Deuteronomy 28, he talks about how people would be taken into slavery. They'd be sold. Their kids would be snatched from them. Wherever they go, the foreigners in the land would be above them. They would be beneath them. And then one of the things that stuck out was in Deuteronomy, in the latter part of Deuteronomy, when he says that you will go back into Egypt. And what he meant was going back into bondage. But this time, instead of walking into Egypt as free people, and walking it as free people, we would go into ships, and we'd be dispersed throughout the nations. And so that was just something that was really pointed out to me, that black people and people that came from the African descent, the Transatlantic Slave Trade, all of those people were taken in ships and sold throughout the nations. And then there were other verses that I had read, and Joel and Psalms, and so as I started to slowly embrace that, I started to really think about a lot that had happened, and I was angry up with God, and I was asking him, why don't we have an identity? And so I wrote something called No Identity. And then I went through another journey where I became angry with our society and how I felt. And so I wrote something called Back in Bondage. And then I enlisted some other people to just help me with the project, to tell a story And then the end of the story is restorative prayer, which is really about something that I had written, and it was really praising God, praising who he was. And so that's just a little bit, a very short synopsis of a short story of my journey of truth and identity. And I continue to be on that journey. And when I also talk about truth, I also came across verses that where God is talking, who made his people forget his name. And then I wanted to understand, how did the name God come into existence? Why do we say Jesus, and why do we say Lord? And so as I started to look at the ancient names of God, Yahuwah, Elohim, and I started looking at that, and I thought, wow, what is the origin of the name of God? And I understood that the ancient Israelites of Scripture would never know if you said God. They wouldn't know who you're talking about. If you said Jesus, they would have no idea. And then realizing that, the letter J didn't come into existence until around the 15 to 1700s. And so the names that we hear today is that his name was Yeshua or Yeshua or Yehoshua. And so then it became important for me to understand the truth about his name, because if he gave us his name and he said, call me by this name, why would we call him by something different? So that has also been a journey that I've been on. And so I hope that you are able to take this journey with us and understand that what this project is all about, and what I've been about, is really truth, and wanting to know what truth is, and wanting to take that truth and just impart it out. And I appreciate those who've been on the journey with me. I appreciate the European people that I've met and talked to that have enlightened me in some way or another. Some not direct, some indirectly, but some very direct. And I appreciate that as well. And so when I think about, people ask, well, who do you say you are? I do believe that the African Americans, including all of those whose ancestors came through the Transatlantic Slave Trade, are the descendants of Jacob, that we are the Israelites of the Bible. And that term also can be pronounced Yisrael or Yashralem. And so I believe that we are. Some people believe that it's only the African Americans. And as I've listened to the Europeans talk, I disagree, because he says that you will be dispersed in ships throughout the nations. And so our ancestors went to Jamaica, went to Haiti, went to Cuba, went to Brazil, went to Honduras. We just went all over the globe, and we were dispersed. And so I'm hoping that even our brothers and sisters that are around the globe, that they come to that knowledge. Because when we come to the knowledge, the lineage of who we are, then we can go and say, hey, forgive us, Yahuwah. Forgive us for the things that we've done. Forgive us how we're living today. And restore us back to you as a people, because he wants us to know truth. He wants us to be restored. But we can't be restored if we don't know who we are. And that's why identity is so important. And again, thank you so much for just taking the time to listen and just hear a little bit about me. And you'll hear a lot more. And I look forward to taking you with me and us learning together about truth and identity.
We ask for forgiveness for the wrong that we have done. Please accept us back as your daughters and your sons. We surrender what we cannot please. Instead we